doctrine of the Trinity teaches us that we serve one God who is represented in three persons. One of the greatest theologians of the church, St. Augustine, wrote 15 volumes on the Trinity around 400 AD, synthesizing and adding the finishing touches to the most profound and exacting statements ever made on the subject. Yet Augustine never claimed that he plumbed the depths of the doctrine. He never made a claim that he finally and fully got it. In fact, he claimed quite the opposite, saying, if you can understand it, it isn't God. There's always an element of mystery when talking about God because his nature is far beyond our comprehension. As we talk about his Trinitarian identity in particular, it can feel like we're talking about believing 6 impossible things before breakfast. We are talking about embracing something that we'll never fully be able to understand, and it's important for us to own up to that, to admit that there are just some things we don't get, and to let that excite us more than it forces us to feel inadequate. Have you ever wondered how theology begins? Did you ever wonder how thoughts about God began, or where the first thoughts were about God? Did you ever think about how we actually arrived at some of these doctrines? Once upon a time, people knew about God in a vague sort of way. They understood he was there and what he was like. And then came somebody who claimed to be God, a man walking around making claims that he was in fact the God they had always known. He was not the sort of man you could really just dismiss as a lunatic. He made people believe in him, so the government and religious establishments had him killed. His followers, though, met him again after they had seen him killed. Then they formed into little communities and somehow found God inside of them as well, directing them, making them able to do things they could not do before. When they tried to intellectually grasp how this had happened, they arrived at the Christian definition of the three-person God. The doctrine of the Trinity states that God is a single substance who exists simultaneously and eternally as 3 separate persons. Some have conceptualized his reality as a perichoresis, which is a kind of circle dance, like Ring Around the Rosie. This dance is comprised of a Father, who is the source of eternal majesty, the Son, who is the eternal Logos or Word incarnate, and the Holy Spirit, who is the Paraclete, the Advocate or the Counselor. This doctrine is born out of the problem of trying to understand all that God seems to have been doing, particularly in and around first century Palestine, and then make that jive with several thousand years of monotheistic tradition, doctrine, faith, practice that preceded the first church. And this is where the concept of the Trinity comes from. When we talk about the Trinity, we're talking about threeness. The word Trinity means threeness. 3 is the most sacred number in Jewish and Christian history. It's the symbol of unity, completion, and perfection. The times of daily prayer were 3. The sanctuary had 3 divisions. Both the tabernacle and the temple consisted of 3 parts. The Holy of Holies was a cube. 3 angels appeared to Abraham and Sarah at the oaks at Mamre. 3 was the first proleptic of the Blessed Trinity, one God in 3 persons.